Hello friends, welcome to this session. Today we'll see how you can use Lambda function to authorize your request coming through API gateway. A client can actually send a request with a bearer token, which will be a JWT token, or you can pass header parameters, and those header parameters will be passed to Lambda auth function as a request params, and in response you will get an IAM policy which will either deny or allow access to the user, which is principal. Though this setup for demo will require multiple resources like a VPC, private subnets, ALB, ECS container running in those private subnets connecting to ALB, and then ALB connecting to API gateway using private link. All that setup will sit somewhere here, and I will not be explaining how to set that up because there are other videos which I have created. You can go through them. In this demo, using that setup, I will focus mainly on how you can configure API gateway to use Lambda authorizer, and this will be especially based on request parameters, so header based request parameters, and the response will be a IAM policy. So how this works is what we will see in this session. So let's get started now, and I will show you the setup. Log into AWS, go to API gateway, and under API I have already created this HTTP API. If I go here, you can see protocol HTTP, and this is stage name. Under routes, I have created two routes. This is default and this is /articles, and get method. Under authorization, we'll create a Lambda authorizer. I'll show you how it looks like when you create, you have to select Lambda here. You have to give some name to Lambda, and then choose your Lambda function which you have already created to use at authorizer. So I have selected this one. Payload, for me it is 2.0 version. Now response mode either could be simple or IAM policy. So this Lambda authorizer will be replying IAM policy. You can set caching for that, and here you will add the resources, like what are the headers which you are going to pass, and then create this. So it will create something like this one. So this Lambda authorizer, this is the name, and this is a Lambda function I created. I will show you the code for it. Payload format, IAM policy, authorizer, and these are the two headers which will be passed to Lambda authorizer, and invoke permissions, and then save. Also I have created a VPC link. This will be a private link, so it's the VPC where it is to be created, the private subnets, because my ALB runs in private subnet, and the security group which allows access to those subnets. So this is created, and in integrations the same one is actually integrated with this API. So if I added this, you see I have selected manually ALB. This is the ALB name, and listener is on port 8080. So my container is running in ECS on port 8080, and then VPC link which I created, and save it. So this will create integrations. Now going back to route, if you see here the get methods for /articles, I have configured the Lambda authorizer, and I have integrated with the VPC link to connect to ALB. Now we'll see the Lambda function. Going to Lambda, this is a Lambda which will be used for authorizing HTTP API JWT auth, and there are two files, index.js, s3 service.js. Make sure when you create Lambda, the index file should be .js. Normally it will create mjs. Also the node version should be 16.x if you directly create here. If you upload the package, then you can use 18.x as well, because you have to have AWS SDK in it. So I will share this code in the description through my GitHub, and you can copy from there. And this code is taking the request from API gateway, and then checking the data of header. So these are the headers. It's matching that headers with the headers saved in S3 file, application.json file, and if those headers match, then it allows access to the endpoint which is requested in the API request. Also make sure that your Lambda timeout is set 30 seconds or so, because it may take some time to open S3 bucket and then read the file and get the response, so it should not time out. Once API gateway and Lambda are set, we can test this in Postman. So I've created get request This is the API gateway deployment URL and /articles. I am passing these two headers in the request, and these are the values. Now the same values are already saved in application.json, which is in S3 bucket, and once Lambda will receive this request, it will try to match these values before it responds. So if I send this request now, I get this response, which is access allowed. Now if any of this data mismatches, let's say API key is different, send this request and response will be unauthorized. So if you see the Lambda code, if the condition fails, then response will be unauthorized. Similarly, if app ID, the another parameter, if it is different, then also the request fails. And again, if both the parameters are matching, then Lambda authorizes and allows the access to the endpoint. So I hope this helps to set up API gateway to use Lambda as authorizer based on request parameters. I hope this helps you, and that's it for this session. See you in next one. Thank you.